XRP as a world reserve currency. That's the topic we're going to be covering in this video. And I know a lot of people probably hear that and think that is so unrealistic. That is insane. That's never going to happen. In this video, I want to tell you why it's actually a lot more probable than many people think. I want to go over an interview from David Schwartz actually talking about this exact topic. That way we can ground this entire conversation in the words of one of the smartest people building on the XRP ledger. In this video, we're going to talk about how XRP could one day become a global reserve currency. This is a video you're not going to want to miss. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who takes the time to like these videos and subscribe to the channel. These two simple things really do help me out so much. Also, if you ever need a place to buy some XRP, make sure to check out my favorite exchange Uphold down in the description of this video. With that said, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So guys, let's jump right into it. And as I said in the intro, when you're talking about something like XRP one day becoming a global reserve currency, I think it's really important we ground the entire conversation in the words of someone who knows the XRP ledger better than anyone else out there, and that is David Schwartz. I think it's really important that we understand that while a lot of these things are extremely optimistic and extremely bullish for XRP, it doesn't mean that they're not something that can't happen. And also, it doesn't mean it doesn't make a lot of sense for some of these things to take place. Whether or not we're close to this eventuality taking place or whether or not it's highly probable, that's really not the topic of discussion in this video. I really want to explore how XRP could one day do it and whether or not that possibility is real. So I want to start this video off and share with you a clip of David Schwartz actually talking about this exact thing, because I think he really covers the key thesis for why you would want XRP as a global reserve currency. And to hear David Schwartz talk about this, I think adds a lot of credibility to the discussion. And that's because David Schwartz is someone who, one, knows the tech better than anyone else, two, is just an extremely smart guy. I would listen to a lot of the things David Schwartz says. But three, is having conversations with central banks and other regulators. He clearly understands the pushback associated with doing something like making XRP a global reserve currency. And if there was some massive thing that would be barring this, preventing it, or making it unrealistic, he would really be the person to know what that major issue was. So to hear David Schwartz talk about some of these things, I think adds a lot of credibility to the discussion and really opens us to the idea, is this something that we could see in the future? So I want to start this off. I want you guys to listen to David Schwartz talk about this exact thing, and it's probably going to preface this entire conversation with some very interesting facts that are absolutely fundamental in this eventually happening. Listen up to this.
You're the holder of the world's reserve currency, and you're the safe haven for the world. All rich people in the world want to invest in the United States because it's safe, because we don't just take people's shit because we don't like them. We have a process. If you start doing that, then the rest of the world's like, wait a second. You're not what I thought you were. I want to get out of dollars. I want to, for example, form a massive global coalition of nations that are not aligned, and we'll do our own thing. It's called BRICS, and it now represents most of the world's power. That's just a fact. So, like, we just ended American dominance in a bunch of different sectors, or began the process of ending it. And I don't even think most Americans know that. Like, the consequences of what the Biden administration did in February of 2022 will be things that your grandchildren have to deal with.
Do you believe that there can be two existing world reserve currencies to simultaneously exist?
I do, and I think that could happen. I think it's quite realistic that a lot of the world is just done with the dollar as the reserve currency. I think that there's a lot of places that are willing to try something else. And one of my scenarios, and I don't think it's going to play out quickly, but like one of my wild case success scenarios for a digital asset is if countries start to realize that the US dollar is not going to be the reserve currency forever. Other things are going to be the reserve currency. And the same thing that we saw with banks. Like, people, when we started selling software to banks, people would say to me, why would a bank use something that, like, you guys were selling them when they could use something that was like made by banks? And what they didn't realize is that, only like 10 banks in the country, on the planet, are Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan Chase, like the ones who would build a system that the entire planet would run on. For the rest of the banks, that's 6,000 smaller banks, those are their biggest, strongest competitors. Those are the entities they hate the most. They would not want to use the system built and maintained by them because it's going to be biased in favor of them, their biggest and strongest competitors. And I think the same thing could happen to nations. Like every nation would love for their currency to be the world reserve currency. That's helped the US, that's grown the US economy, quote unquote, unfairly by leaps and bounds for decades. And every other country would be like, yeah, we'd like to have the world be the world's reserve currency. But the only countries that could possibly pull it off is the US holding its position, maybe the EU, maybe Russia, maybe one or two others. But realistically, most countries know that if there's going to be a new world reserve currency that's a country's currency, it's not going to be them. And so they might actually prefer a currency that nobody can control to one that's controlled by their largest geopolitical rivals. And so that's like what I think is the biggest possible success scenario for digital assets. If these countries are like, okay, well, the US dollar can't hold on forever, but it's not going to be our currency because no one's going to want to repeat the US dollar scenario. Nobody but the EU wants the EU to replace the dollar, right? Nobody but Russia wants the ruble to replace the dollar. Nobody but China wants the yuan to replace the dollar. So maybe they could settle on a currency that nobody could control rather than one controlled by their most powerful geopolitical rival. So if you want a success scenario, that's the one that I think is the most likely.
But the money question is, how do you get everybody to agree?
Well, I mean, they might agree if the alternative is that their geopolitical rivals force some new replacement for the dollar that's not, that just, if they just replace, the old boss with a new boss. If the choice is no boss, if that happens to make a bunch of cryptocurrency people rich, I don't think they're going to see that as too much of a minus.
But Schwartz there, he actually has thought about this a lot before, which I think is awesome. It's not like he was just asked a question on the spot and he was just spitballing to throw something out. He has clearly thought in depth about a digital asset. I would think XRP, I think it's obvious it would be XRP based on David Schwartz answering the question, becoming that global, neutral, decentralized reserve currency. Now, I think his point here is absolutely spot on. There is no future where the dollar remains the only major currency used for liquidity and used for transactions. We see more and more countries moving away from the dollar every single day. And what David Schwartz says is critical. You shouldn't have to trust each other as a country in order to run a financial system. You shouldn't have to trust your enemy. You shouldn't even have to trust your ally. You should be in a situation where no trust is required. And that is exactly what the XRP ledger can add to this equation. You don't need to have countries relying on one another to operate in a financial system. You could have countries just trusting themselves and still being able to conduct business with someone who is either an enemy or an ally. That is an extremely powerful system. But the system we live in right now is completely different. Essentially, almost every country out there is being forced to use the US dollar as a neutral settlement asset. And at the end of the day, it's just straight up not neutral. The United States has weaponized the financial system against other countries, and the United States can also use that financial system to export things they don't want in their system, like inflation, to other countries. So almost every country using the US dollar as its settlement asset is dealing with whatever the United States wants to do. And the simple fact is not every country has the same interest as the United States. So the point David Schwartz is making in this interview is, if we are going towards a new system, if we are building a new standard, are we going to see all these countries who have had a system weaponized against them opt in to another system that also has the potential to be weaponized against them? The answer is probably not. They are either going to want to be the controller of the system, or they are going to accept the fact that there needs to be no controller, and they'll opt into a system where everyone's on the same level playing field. This is the financial system I believe we absolutely need to head into, and it's the financial system that XRP facilitates. At the end of the day, as long as you have a centralized party controlling a system that other countries or other counterparties are relying on, you are recreating the same problem we already have in the financial system. The only way to fix the financial system and create a level playing field where everyone can do business completely irrespectively of whether or not they're doing business with an enemy or an ally or a neutral counterparty is to have a decentralized neutral system that connects all the parties that need to interact with one another. This is where Ripple is trying to strategically position XRP. This is the end goal for XRP becoming decentralized neutral liquidity for the entire world financial system. And it doesn't mean that XRP needs to be in every single transaction. If I'm Venmoing my mom, right, that's a pretty trusted transaction. I probably don't need XRP in the middle of that. But the vast majority of transactions out there do happen between counterparties that simply don't trust each other or would like to conduct transactions in a way that doesn't require trust if it's not needed to be there. This is what David Schwartz is highlighting in this interview. The idea that the system as we know it today is going to change. Currencies typically only last about 100 years, especially reserve currencies. So if we do see that change, are we going to see something completely different and unique to what we have seen before? And I think based on where this world is headed, as we move into a more internet-dominated world, a world where everything is digital, it makes a lot of sense to see digital currencies also as a critical part of this equation for the next generation financial system. Ripple is positioning XRP with the major financial institutions to be this asset. There's a lot of different cryptocurrencies out there that could be that asset, but there's very few cryptocurrencies who have a team like Ripple meeting with the most important financial institutions, meeting with the most important governments on earth to implement this system. So I think the combination of the technology and Ripple being on the forefront of building these things are the things in tandem that can make David Schwartz's vision actually play out. Do I think XRP is going to be a world reserve currency tomorrow? Absolutely not. We are still at the early stages of all of this. But I think it's absolutely critical to understand that the idea of a decentralized neutral asset like XRP becoming a world reserve currency isn't something that's necessarily completely unrealistic. And in fact, the logic behind it makes a ton of sense. It doesn't mean we're close to that logic playing out, but it does mean the thesis behind why it would happen absolutely checks out, and some of the smartest people in this space have been thinking about it for a very long time. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update, and for now, Mickle out.